I believed the funeral was just a final goodbye until her lawyer pulled me aside and whispered a warning not to trust my parents or go home alone. I followed him to a dark office where a stranger waited in the shadows. He was not a cop, but he was the only one who knew how she really died. The most terrifying part was realizing the next trap was already set for me. My name is Maya Hartley. I am 32 years old, and until this morning, I thought the worst thing that could happen to a family was death. I was wrong. The worst thing is what comes after, when the grief is just a thin veil draped over the ugly, sharp edges of greed. The rain in Tacoma does not wash things clean. It just makes everything heavy. It presses the gray sky down against the earth until you feel like you are walking through water rather than air. That was exactly how the air felt at the cemetery. Thick and smelling of wet pine needles, turned dirt, and the cloying, suffocating scent of white lilies that were already beginning to wilt in the drizzle. We were burying my grandmother, Evelyn Hartley, to everyone else standing under the canopy of black umbrellas. She was a respected elder of the community, a woman of grace and quiet fortitude. To me, she was the only person who had ever made me feel safe, and now she was being lowered into a 6-foot hole in the ground at the edge of the city, while the people who were supposed to love her the most stood watching with dry eyes and impatient postures. I stood apart from them. I pulled my coat tighter against the damp chill. Watching the rain drip from the edge of the tent, I felt hollowed out, scraped empty by the suddenness of her passing. A heart attack, the coroner had said. Just one of those things that happens when you are 78. But then I felt a hand on my elbow. It was not a comforting touch. It was sharp, urgent, a grip that dug into the wool of my sleeve. I turned to see Arthur Wexler. He had been my grandmother's lawyer for as long as I could remember. Arthur was a man who usually looked like he was made of parchment paper and old tweed, dry and brittle, but today, his face was flushed, and his eyes were darting around the small crowd like a frightened animal. He pulled me a few steps away, under the dripping branches of a cedar tree, ostensibly to offer his condolences away from the main group. He leaned in close, so close I could smell the stale coffee and peppermint on his breath. "Maya," he whispered. His voice was a rasp, barely audible over the sound of the rain hitting the leaves. "Listen to me very carefully. Do not react. Just listen." I started to ask him what was wrong, but he squeezed my arm harder, silencing me. "She did not die naturally," Arthur hissed. The words hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. "And you are being watched." I stared at him, my breath catching in my throat. I wanted to pull away, to ask him if he had lost his mind, but the intensity in his eyes froze me in place. "Do not tell your mother," he continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Do not tell your stepfather, and do not tell your brother. Do not trust them, and for the love of God. Maya, when you go back to the house, do not drink anything they give you, not water, not tea, nothing." He let go of my arm as abruptly as he had grabbed it, stepping back and smoothing his tie. His face composing itself into a mask of professional mourning as he saw my stepfather turning his head toward us. "My office," Arthur said, his voice now loud enough for others to hear, though still professional. "I have some final paperwork regarding the estate whenever you are ready, Maya, perhaps later this week." But his eyes said something else entirely. Tonight. He walked away, disappearing into the sea of black coats, leaving me standing there with my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "She did not die naturally." The sentence replayed in my mind, looping over and over. I looked back at the grave. My mother, Dana, was standing near the hearse. She was adjusting her gloves, her face perfectly composed. She looked beautiful, in that sharp, angular way she always did, like a diamond that could cut glass. Next to her was Cole, my stepfather. He was checking his watch. He caught my eye and offered a tight, thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a performance. I realized then that I had been watching a performance all morning. And then there was Grant, my older brother. He was standing slightly behind them, looking at his shoes. He looked pale, almost sick. He kept shifting his weight from one foot to the other. like he wanted to run. I forced myself to walk back toward them. I had to act normal. I had to pretend that my world hadn't just tilted on its axis. As I approached the cars, the wind shifted, carrying their voices toward me. They didn't see me coming. I was walking on the soft, wet grass rather than the gravel path. "It just needs to be the right timing," Cole was saying. His voice was low, irritated. "We need the papers done before anyone asks questions." "Keep your voice down," my mother snapped, her voice a harsh whisper. "She is coming." They stopped talking abruptly as I stepped onto the gravel. The silence that fell between us was heavy, loaded with things unsaid. "Maya, honey," Dana said, her voice instantly transforming into a warm, melodic tone that made my skin crawl. "Are you riding with us to the wake? We have some food prepared at the house." "I drove myself," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and tinny. "I think I need a moment alone. I will meet you there." "Don't take too long," Cole said. "We have family coming. We need to present a united front." A united front? The irony tasted like bile in my mouth. I watched them get into the sleek black town car. As the door closed, blocking them from view, a memory surfaced, sharp and sudden. It was from 3 weeks ago. I had gone to visit Grandma Evelyn. She had been acting strange that day. Usually, she was calm, organized. But that afternoon, she had been frantic. I found her in the study, moving things around. She was taking her spare house key out of the porcelain vase where she had kept it for 20 years and taping it under the desk. When she saw me, she had jumped, actually jumped, as if I were an intruder. "Grandma?" I had asked. "What are you doing?" She had come over to me, her hands trembling as she took mine. Her hands were always cold, but that day they were icy. "Maya," she had said, looking deep into my eyes. "Promise me something." "Anything," I said. "Don't sign anything they give you," she said. She didn't say who they were, but the fear in her eyes was terrified and specific. "No matter what they say, no matter how much they pressure you, don't sign, and watch the drawers. They check the drawers." At the time, I thought it was just age. I thought she was getting confused. Maybe the early stages of dementia that she had always feared. I had hugged her and told her not to worry. I had dismissed it. God, I had dismissed it. Standing there in the rain, watching the taillights of my parents' car fade into the mist, the guilt hit me so hard I almost doubled over. She had known. She had been trying to warn me, and I had patted her hand and treated her like a child. Unnatural death. I could not go to the wake. I could not walk into that house, eat their food, and look at them knowing what Arthur had told me. I got into my car. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get the key into the ignition. I drove. I didn't go home to my apartment in the city. I drove aimlessly for hours, watching the daylight fade into a bruised purple twilight. I watched the rain streak the windshield, blurring the world into streaks of neon and gray. I waited until I was sure the funeral reception would be winding down. I waited until the city was dark. Then, I turned the car around and headed toward the old downtown district where Arthur Wexler's office was located. It was almost 9 o'clock at night when I pulled into the small parking lot behind the brick building. The area was quiet. The businesses closed for the night. The streetlights reflected on the wet pavement, creating pools of orange light that did little to cut through the gloom. The building itself was mostly dark. The windows were like black eyes staring down at me, but there was a single light on in the lobby, a faint yellow glow that barely reached the street. I turned off the engine. The silence inside the car was deafening. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around, to go home, to pretend none of this was happening. But then I thought of Grandma Evelyn hiding her keys. I thought of Cole checking his watch at a funeral. I opened the car door and stepped out. The air had turned colder. I walked toward the back entrance of the building, my heels clicking loudly on the pavement. As I got closer to the door, I stopped. The door was a heavy steel slab, painted a dark green that looked black in the night. It was cracked open, just an inch. But what stopped me was the figure standing just inside the frame. It wasn't Arthur. Arthur was short and stooped. This figure was tall, broad-shouldered. He was standing in the shadows, just beyond the reach of the lobby light, but I could see the outline of him. He was standing perfectly still, like a statue, facing the door, facing me. He wasn't waiting for just anyone. He was waiting for me. Arthur had said I was being watched. He had told me to come here, but he hadn't told me I would be meeting someone else. My hand went to my purse, gripping the strap until my knuckles turned white. I took a step back, ready to run back to my car. Maya Hartley. A voice came from the shadows. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. The voice was deep, gravelly, and calm. The figure stepped forward, just enough for the faint light to catch the side of his face. He didn't look like a lawyer. He didn't look like family. He looked like trouble. "Arthur is upstairs," the man said. "He is too scared to come down, but we have been waiting for you." He pushed the door open wider, revealing the dark hallway behind him. It was a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The only person who knows how the tea was made," he said. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. I looked at the dark street behind me, then at the dark hallway in front of me. Grandma's warning echoed in my head. Don't sign anything. I took a breath that tasted of rain and fear, and I stepped across the threshold, into the dark. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, cutting off the damp noise of the street. Before I could even adjust to the gloom of the hallway, Arthur Wexler was there. He moved with a frantic, bird-like energy, his trembling hands fumbling with the deadbolt. He twisted the lock once, then checked it again, his shoulder pressing against the metal as if his frail body could stop whatever he thought was coming for us. "We are not safe here in the open," Arthur muttered, more to himself than to me. He grabbed my elbow, his grip surprisingly strong, and steered me toward the inner sanctum of his office. The stranger followed us. He did not scurry like Arthur. He moved with a predator's quiet confidence, his heavy boots making no sound on the thin commercial carpet. We entered Arthur's private office, a room that smelled of old leather and stale cigar smoke. The blinds were drawn tight, sealing us in. Arthur went straight to his desk, but he did not sit down. He stood behind his high-backed chair, gripping the leather as if it were a shield. The stranger leaned against a filing cabinet in the corner, crossing his arms over his chest. In the better light, I could see him clearly. He was younger than I had thought, maybe in his late 30s, with a scar running through his left eyebrow and eyes that looked like they had seen things most people only see in nightmares. "I am Jonah Pike," he said. His voice was low, filling the room without effort. "Your grandmother hired me 4 months ago." "My grandmother hired a private investigator?" I asked, the absurdity of the statement making me want to laugh. Evelyn Hartley was a woman who spent her days gardening and reading historical biographies. She did not hire men who looked like they carried concealed weapons. "She did," Jonah said, "because she knew she was running out of time." Arthur cleared his throat, a nervous, rattling sound. "Maya, please sit down. What we are about to show you it is difficult." I remained standing. I felt that if I sat down, I might never get back up. "Just tell me." Jonah pushed off the filing cabinet and walked to the center of the room. He did not waste time with pleasantries. "Your grandmother did not die of a heart attack," Jonah stated. "At least, not one that happened by accident. She suspected for weeks that someone was tampering with her morning routine, specifically, her tea." I shook my head. "That is impossible. She made her own tea." Jonah held up a finger. "Usually, yes, but 3 months ago, her arthritis flared up. Your mother started coming over in the mornings to help. She would brew the Earl Grey, add the honey, and bring it to Evelyn in the sunroom. And about 20 minutes later, Evelyn would start to feel dizzy. Her heart would race. She told me it felt like her chest was full of fluttering moths." "This is insane," I said, my voice rising. "You are accusing my mother of poisoning her own mother? Dana is selfish. Yes, she is greedy, but she is not a murderer." Arthur opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the mahogany surface toward me. It was a lab report from a private toxicology firm in Seattle. We did not use the coroner, Arthur explained softly. Evelyn insisted on discretion. She managed to save a sample of the tea from a week before she died. She poured it into a small travel shampoo bottle and smuggled it to me. I looked at the paper. I saw words I did not understand, chemical compounds with long, jagged names. But I understood the summary at the bottom. High concentration of digitalis and beta blockers, inconsistent with prescribed medication. She did not want to go to the police, Jonah said, watching my face closely. Not until she was 100% sure. She kept saying it had to be a mistake. She loved them, even when they did not love her back. She wanted to believe it was accidental, maybe a mix-up with her own pills. But she was smart. Maya. She started testing it. Testing it? I whispered. Jonah reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black notebook. It was hers. I recognized the floral cover instantly. I had bought it for her 2 birthdays ago. He opened it to a marked page and handed it to me. My grandmother's handwriting, usually so elegant and looping, was cramped and shaky here. October 14th, 8:30 in the morning. Dana brought the cup. Tasted bitter. Metallic. Did not drink at all. Poured half in the ficus plant. Heart rate spiked to 120 at 9 o'clock. October 16th. Cole made the tea. Too much sugar. Masking the taste. Felt heavy limbs afterwards. Slept for 4 hours. October 20th. Grant was here. He watched me drink it. He looked sad. Why did he look so sad? I felt tears pricking my eyes. Hot and angry. I read the entries. Date after date. A chronicle of her own slow murder, written in her own hand. She was gathering evidence, Jonah said. She wanted a case so watertight that when she finally went to the authorities, they could not talk their way out of it. She was protecting the estate, yes, but mostly, she was trying to figure out why. Arthur moved around the desk then. He was holding a large manila envelope. It was thick, sealed with red wax. On the front, in clear, steady letters, was my name. Maya. Evelyn left this for you, Arthur said. His voice was solemn, like a priest giving last rites. But I must warn you, once you open this, there is no going back. Ignorance is a form of protection. Maya, right now, you are just a grieving granddaughter. If you open this, you become a threat. You become the enemy. I looked at the envelope. I could feel the heat radiating from it. What is in it? I asked. The truth, Arthur said, and the weapon she forged to fight them. I reached out. My hand was trembling so bad I thought I might drop it, but as soon as my fingers touched the paper, I felt a strange sense of calm. It was the same calm I used to feel when I sat on the floor of her library while she read to me. I tore the seal. Inside was a stack of documents, a USB drive, and a handwritten letter. Jonah took a step closer. Listen to me. Maya, this is the part you need to understand before you read a single word of that letter. You think they killed her for the money. You think this is about the inheritance, the house in Tacoma, the investment accounts. Isn't it? I asked. They are broke. I know Cole has gambling debts. I know Dana's boutique is failing. That is part of it, Jonah said. But it is not the whole picture. If they just wanted the money, they could have waited. Evelyn was 78. Nature would have taken its course eventually. He paused, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. They killed her now because she was about to change something fundamental, Jonah said. And they are not just coming for the estate. They are coming for you. For me? I frowned. I have nothing. I am a graphic designer. I rent my apartment. I drive a 6-year-old car. Arthur pointed to a specific document in the stack I was holding. Look at the second page, the draft petition. I pulled the paper out. It was a legal document, a petition for conservatorship. My eyes scanned the legal jargon. Petitioner seeks full legal and medical guardianship over the proposed ward, due to history of instability and inability to manage financial affairs. I looked at the name of the proposed ward. It was my name, Maya Louise Hartley. They were going to claim you are mentally unfit, Arthur said, his voice full of disgust. They have been building a case for months. Documentation of your depression after your divorce. Statements from concerned family members about your erratic behavior. Jonah cut in, his voice hard as flint. If your grandmother died naturally, the estate would pass to your mother. But Evelyn told them she was changing the will to skip a generation. She was leaving everything to you. I stared at them, my brain struggling to catch up. So they killed her to stop the change? No, Jonah said. They killed her because they found out she had already made the change. But if you inherit the money, they get nothing. Unless they control me. I finished the sentence, the horror of it settling in my chest like a block of ice. Exactly, Jonah said. If they get conservatorship over you, they control your finances, they control your medical decisions, they control the estate you just inherited, they get the money, and they get to keep you under their thumb for the rest of your life. You become their personal bank account, and you never have a say in how a single penny is spent. Arthur nodded grimly. And with your grandmother gone, there is no one left to vouch for your sanity. No one to stand in court and say that you are perfectly capable. They isolate you. They drug you, perhaps using the same method they used on Evelyn, to make you appear unstable to any court evaluator. And then they own you. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. I thought about the way Dana had hugged me at the funeral. So tight it felt like a trap. I thought about Cole's cold eyes. I thought about the tea they had tried to give me. I am not just a victim, I whispered. I am the next target. Jonah nodded. He moved away from the filing cabinet and stood directly in front of me. That is why you are here. Maya, you have two choices. You can walk out that door, get in your car, drive to California, and never look back. Let them have the money. Let them win. You survive, but you lose everything she built. And the other choice? I asked, looking up at him. He pointed to the USB drive in my hand. We play the game, he said. We let them think their plan is working. We let them think you are the weak, broken girl they want you to be. And while they are busy digging a grave for your life, we push them into it. I gripped the envelope tighter. I thought of my grandmother writing in her notebook, her heart fluttering like a trapped moth, knowing her own daughter was poisoning her. She had stayed alive long enough to give me this chance. She had endured the pain so I would have a weapon. I am not going to California, I said. Good, Jonah said. A small, dangerous smile touched the corner of his mouth. Because we have a lot of work to do before morning. I sat at Arthur's heavy oak desk. The contents of the envelope spread out before me like the anatomy of a disaster. The air in the room felt stifling, charged with the static of secrets that had been kept for too long. My hands, still cold from the rain outside, hovered over the papers. There was a single sheet of yellow legal pad paper on top. It was covered in my grandmother's script, but the writing was not the fluid. Confident cursive I had grown up reading in birthday cards. It was jagged, spiked with tremors of pain or fear. What chilled me the most was the absence of names. Nowhere on the page did she write Dana or Cole. It was as if she could not bear to etch their names in ink alongside her suspicions. Or perhaps she was terrified that if they found this, they would destroy it instantly if they saw themselves identified. Instead, she used titles, cold, functional titles that made them sound like strangers. The carrier, she wrote, always brings the morning cup. Smiles too much when handing it over. That had to be my mother. Dana always smiled with her teeth, never her eyes. The watcher, she continued, stands by the door, checks the clock, gets impatient when I do not finish it. Cole. That was Cole. I could picture him leaning against the doorframe, checking his expensive watch, tapping his foot. And then, a third one that made my stomach twist. The shield. He does not know. They sent him away when the cup comes. I must keep him away to keep him clean. Grant, my brother, she knew they were using him, or at least hiding their sins from him. She was protecting him even while she was dying. Jonah stepped forward and placed a small, clear plastic evidence bag on top of the legal pad. Inside was a dried, brownish stain on a piece of tissue paper. "This is the residue from the last cup she managed to pour out," Jonah said quietly. She dabbed it up with a napkin and hid it in the spine of her Bible. We ran the test on this specific sample. It was loaded with enough digoxin to stop the heart of a linebacker, let alone a woman of 78. I stared at the stained tissue. It looked so innocuous. Just a dirty scrap of paper. But it was a murder weapon. Arthur reached over and plugged the small silver USB drive into his laptop. He turned the screen toward me. "There are photos here," Arthur said, timestamps of them entering and leaving her room. "But you need to hear this." He clicked on an audio file labeled simply, October 24th. The sound of static filled the quiet office, followed by a rustling noise, like a microphone being hidden under fabric. Then, my grandmother's voice cut through the silence. It was weak, breathless, stripped of its usual strength. "It tastes like metal today," her voice rasped from the speakers, like sucking on an old penny. I told her it was too sweet, but she insisted. She said it was a new honey blend. A pause, a ragged intake of breath. "I feel the fluttering starting. My chest feels heavy. If I go to the hospital, they will see it. But if I say it out loud, if I say my own daughter is doing this, the family is gone. The shame will eat us alive." I closed my eyes, tears hot on my cheeks. She had stayed silent to protect the family name. She had chosen to die slowly rather than let the world see the rot at the core of our house. "Maya," the recording continued, and the sound of my name made me jump. "If you are listening to this, I am gone, and you are in danger. Do not trust the tears. Do not trust the food. And for the love of God, child, do not sign the papers. They will try to make you sign. They need you to be weak so they can be strong." The recording ended with a sharp click. The silence that followed was heavy, almost physical. Arthur removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. She wanted to be wrong. Maya, up until the very end, she prayed it was just her imagination. That is why she hired Jonah instead of going to the police. She wanted proof, but she dreaded finding it. I looked up at the two men. It all made sense now. The scene at the cemetery replayed in my mind, but the filter was gone. I saw Dana and Cole standing apart from the other mourners. They had not been crying. They had been huddled close, heads bowed not in prayer, but in conference. "Just need the right timing," Cole had said. "Papers done before anyone asks." They were not grieving. They were managing a project, and the project was me. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling with a rage I had never felt before. "Why now? Why not wait?" Jonah leaned against the edge of the desk. "Because they are drowning. Maya, we ran a full financial background check on both of them." He slid another document across the desk. It was a credit report, thick with red ink. "Your mother's boutique has not turned a profit in 4 years, Jonah explained. "She has been funding it with high-interest loans. And Cole? He leveraged their house to buy into a tech startup that went bust 6 months ago. They are upside down on everything. They owe close to $2 million to creditors who are not known for their patience." I stared at the numbers. $2 million. "They are desperate," Arthur added. "Your grandmother was their safety net. They assumed they would get access to her liquid assets immediately upon her death. But then..." "Then what?" I asked. "Then she tried to see me." Arthur said, 2 weeks ago, Evelyn called my office. She said she wanted to make an emergency amendment to her will. She wanted to explicitly bypass Dana and establish a trust for you directly, with a third-party executor. She wanted to make sure they could not touch a cent." He paused, looking pained. "We set the appointment for the next morning, but she never showed up. When I called the house, Cole answered. He said Evelyn was having a bad day and was confused, that she did not know what she was saying. He blocked me from seeing her. They knew. I realized they knew she was about to cut them off. So they sped up the timeline," Jonah said. "They increased the dosage. They had to take her out before she could sign that amendment." "So the will stands?" I asked. "The old will?" Arthur nodded. Technically, yes, but because she did not get to sign the new one, the estate falls into a gray area where Dana can contest it. That is why they need the conservatorship over you. If you are declared incompetent, Dana becomes the steward of your inheritance. She gets the money to pay off their debts, and you get locked away in a facility or medicated into oblivion in your own bedroom. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. It was a perfect trap. If I fought them openly, they would use my anger as proof of my instability. If I did nothing, they would drug me until I really did lose my mind. I stood up and walked to the window. Through the slats of the blinds, I could see the street below. A car drove by, its headlights cutting through the rain. I cannot go to the police yet. Can I? I asked, not turning around. Jonah shook his head. Not with just this. The audio is hearsay. The residue is from a cup she threw away. Technically compromised evidence. We need to catch them in the act. We need to prove intent. We need to show that they are actively trying to do the same thing to you. I turned back to face them. The fear was still there, sitting heavy in my gut, but something else was growing alongside it, a cold, hard resolve. I am not going to run, I said. I looked at the picture of my grandmother on Arthur's desk. She looked so small, so fragile, but she had been fighting a war in her own kitchen, all alone. I want to know exactly what to do. I told Jonah. Arthur looked relieved, but Jonah just nodded, his expression grim. You have to go back there, Jonah said. You have to walk into that house, knowing what you know, and you have to act like the grieving, confused daughter they expect you to be. You have to let them think they are winning. I picked up the USB drive and closed my hand around it. It felt cold and hard, like a stone. I can do that, I said. I have been watching them lie my whole life. It is time I showed them I learned something from it. But remember, Arthur warned, his voice shaking slightly, you are walking into a cage with tigers. If you slip up, if you let the mask drop for 1 second, they will know, and they have nothing left to lose. I put the USB drive in my pocket. Let them try, I said. They think I am the prey. Let them keep thinking that. I gathered the papers, my hands steady now. I was ready to play the part. I was ready to go home. The plan Jonah laid out was simple, but simplicity is often the hardest thing to maintain when your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. The strategy relied entirely on my ability to suppress every instinct I had to scream, to accuse, and to run. We are going to give them exactly what they want, Jonah said, leaning back against the heavy filing cabinet, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked like a man who had planned 100 ambushes, and perhaps he had. You are going to go back to that house and be the grieving, overwhelmed granddaughter. You are going to be fragile. You are going to be confused. You are going to apologize for disappearing. Arthur interjected, his voice trembling slightly as he polished his glasses with a handkerchief. But you must be vigilant about the paperwork. Maya, this is the most critical part. They will not just come at you with poisoned tea. They will come with documents. He pulled a blank form from his drawer and slid it across the mahogany desk. This is a durable power of attorney, Arthur explained, tapping the paper with a thin finger. And this one is a medical directive. They might slip these in a stack of sympathy cards, or tell you it is just a form to authorize the funeral home arrangements. If you sign this, you are effectively handing them the keys to your life. They can empty your bank accounts, sell your apartment, and commit you to a psychiatric facility without a judge even blinking. I looked at the innocent-looking papers. They looked so bureaucratic, so boring. It was terrifying to think that my freedom could be erased by a ballpoint pen. So what is the rule? I asked, looking between the two men. The rule is absolute silence on what you know, Jonah said, his voice dropping an octave. You do not confront them. You do not throw the accusation in their face, no matter how angry you get. The moment you say, I know what you did, you lose your leverage. They will panic, and desperate people are dangerous. You need to be a sponge, absorb everything, agree to everything verbally, but sign nothing. Stall, Arthur added. Tell them you have a migraine. Tell them your hand is shaking too much. Tell them you need to read it in the morning light. Delay, delay, delay. Jonah reached into his leather bag and pulled out a small, gray device. It looked exactly like a standard car key fob. "This is a voice-activated recorder," he said, handing it to me. "It has a 50-hour battery life. Keep it on your keys. Keep your keys in your pocket. Washington is a two-party consent state for recording, which means technically we cannot use audio recorded without their permission in court, unless we can prove there is an expectation of a crime being committed, or we use it solely to impeach their testimony later. But for now, the goal isn't court, it is leverage. I need to know exactly what they are saying to you when they think no one is listening." I took the device. It felt heavy, cold, and real. "I also have a team ready to install cameras," Jonah continued, "but I cannot legally plant bugs in your mother's house. However, you are a resident guest. If you were to place a nanny cam in your own living space for security, that is a gray area we can work with. But better yet, I need you to lure them into public spaces or near windows where my team can use parabolic microphones." I nodded, my mind racing. I needed to establish a baseline of normalcy. If I stayed away all night, they would get suspicious. They would start spinning a narrative that I was having a mental breakdown. "I need to text Grant," I said, pulling out my phone. "If I don't, Dana will spin this. She will tell him I am off the rails." I typed out a message, keeping my fingers steady. "Grant, I am so sorry I took off. The funeral was just too much. I drove to the coast to clear my head. Heading back now. Love you." It was a lie, but it was a safe lie. It was the kind of lie a sad, grieving sister would tell. Arthur cleared his throat, drawing my attention back to the desk. "There is one more thing. Maya." He stood up and walked to a small safe set into the wall behind a landscape painting. He spun the dial. Left, right, left, and the heavy door swung open with a groan. From inside, he pulled a small, steel lockbox. It was old. The paint chipped at the corners. "Evelyn brought this to me 6 months ago," Arthur said softly. "She said that if anything happened, I was to give it to you, but she did not give me the combination." He placed the box in front of me. It had a digital keypad requiring 4 numbers. "She said you would know the code," Arthur said. "She said it was the answer to a riddle you two used to play." I stared at the box. My grandmother loved games. She loved secrets. It was her way of creating a world just for the two of us, a world where Dana and Cole could not enter. "What was the riddle?" I asked. Arthur consulted a note clipped to the file. He adjusted his glasses. She wrote, "Ask Maya what color the porcelain bird is." The breath caught in my throat. The porcelain bird. It was a memory from when I was 7 years old. I was running through her living room, a wild thing full of energy, and my elbow had caught the edge of her curio cabinet. A small, delicate bird had fallen. It shattered into a dozen pieces. I was terrified. I thought Dana would scream at me. I thought I would be punished. But Grandma Evelyn had just knelt down. She had picked up the pieces and smiled. "It is just a thing. Maya." She had told me, "Things break. People heal." We had spent the afternoon gluing it back together. It was a blue bird. But not just blue. Grandma was an artist. She was specific about colors. "It is not blue. Maya," she had told me, tapping the little beak. "It is cerulean." Cerulean. I looked at the keypad. It was numeric. I closed my eyes, thinking of how she taught me to convert words to numbers using the old telephone keypad system she had on her rotary phone. She used to make me memorize phone numbers by the words they spelled. CERU. 2, 3, 7, 8. I reached out and typed the numbers. 2378. There was a soft click, and the lid popped open. My heart soared. It was like she was in the room with me, whispering in my ear, inside the box. There was not money or jewelry. There was a single, heavy iron key and a deed to a property I had never heard of, a cabin in the Cascades, listed solely in her maiden name. "She made you a sanctuary," Jonah said, looking at the deed, "a place they do not know about." Arthur nodded. If things get too dangerous, Maya, that is where you go. But for now, we leave it here. It is safer in my safe. I took the USB drive and the envelope of evidence from the desk. I cannot take these into the house. I said, if they search my bag, hide them in your car, Jonah instructed, but not in the glove box, not under the seat. Do you have a spare tire well? I nodded. Put them under the spare tire, wrapped in the jack kit. It is the last place someone looks in a casual search, and Arthur will keep digital copies here on an encrypted server. I stood up. I felt different than the woman who had walked in from the rain an hour ago. I was no longer just grieving. I was armed. I had a mission. I will head back, I said. The drive is 40 minutes. That puts me home around 11 o'clock. Late enough to go straight to bed. Early enough to show I am responsible. Jonah walked me to the back door. He didn't offer good luck. He just offered a grim nod. Watch your drink, Maya, he whispered, and watch your back. Arthur unlocked the heavy steel door, and I stepped back out into the night. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with fog, the streetlights creating hazy halos in the dark. The silence of the industrial park was profound, broken only by the distant hum of the highway. I walked toward my car, my heels clicking on the wet asphalt. I clutched my purse tight against my side, feeling the weight of the key fob recorder in my pocket. I was 10 feet from my car when I heard it. The sound of an engine turning over. It was a low, throaty rumble, coming from the far corner of the lot, nestled in the deepest shadows where the streetlight didn't reach. I froze. It was a dark sedan, the make indistinguishable in the gloom. The headlights did not come on. The engine just idled, a steady, rhythmic growl in the darkness. I didn't run. Running would show fear. Running would show guilt. I forced myself to walk at the same pace, calm and measured, to my driver's side door. I unlocked it, slipped inside, and locked it immediately. As I pulled out of the lot, I checked my rearview mirror. The dark sedan didn't move. It just sat there, its engine running, like a beast waiting in a cave. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from Grant. Glad you are safe. Mom is worried sick. Just come home. I stared at the words. Mom is worried sick. I knew now what that worry really meant. She wasn't worried about my safety. She was worried that her prey had wandered too far from the trap. I merged onto the highway, the lights of Tacoma spreading out before me like a grid of electric stars. I was going home, but it wasn't a home anymore. It was a battlefield, and I was driving straight into the line of fire. The house in Tacoma sat on a hill overlooking the dark, oily water of the Sound, a sprawling structure of gray cedar and glass that my grandmother had bought 30 years ago. It used to look majestic to me, a castle where I played hide-and-seek in the corridors. Tonight, as I idled my car at the bottom of the long, winding driveway, it looked like a mausoleum. The windows were glowing with warm, yellow light, a deceptive invitation that promised comfort, but concealed a trap. I checked my phone. It was 11:15 at night. I had been gone for hours. The text to Grant had bought me some time, but not enough to explain away the tension I knew was waiting for me behind the front door. I touched the pocket of my coat, feeling the hard outline of the voice recorder. I switched it on, a silent prayer that the tiny red light was blinking, capturing whatever was about to happen. I parked the car, took a deep breath that rattled in my chest, and walked up the stone steps. The moment I turned the key in the lock, the door was pulled open from the inside. Maya. It was my mother, Dana. She was wearing a cashmere cardigan the color of oatmeal, her hair perfectly coiffed, her face a mask of frantic maternal concern. She didn't just hug me, she enveloped me, her arms wrapped around my shoulders, pulling me into the foyer, pressing me against the scent of her expensive perfume which could not quite mask the smell of stale lilies from the funeral arrangements in the living room. We were sick with worry. She breathed against my ear. Her grip was tight, bordering on painful. Why didn't you answer your phone? We thought you had crashed. We didn't know what to think. I went limp in her arms, letting my body sag. I had to be the broken doll. I just needed to drive. "Mom," I said, making my voice thin and reedy. I couldn't breathe in there. The cemetery. It was too much. She pulled back, holding me at arm's length. Her eyes scanned my face, searching. I knew what she was looking for. She wasn't looking for grief. She was looking for defiance. She was checking to see if the drug of her manipulation was still working. I stared back at her with wide, watery eyes, letting my shoulders slump. "I am sorry," I whispered. "I didn't mean to scare you." "You are safe now," she said, smoothing a stray hair from my forehead. Her touch was cold. "Come, sit down. You look pale." She guided me into the living room. My stepfather, Cole, was standing by the fireplace. The gas logs were burning, casting flickering shadows across his face. He held a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand, the ice clinking softly as he swirled it. He didn't come over to hug me. He just watched me with flat, shark-like eyes. "Rough night," Cole said. His voice was smooth, lacking any real empathy. I nodded, sinking onto the plush sofa. It felt like quicksand. Grant was sitting in the armchair in the corner, looking miserable. He jumped up when he saw me, relief washing over his face. "Maya, thank God," he said, taking a step toward me. "I told them you were probably just down at the waterfront, but Mom was about to call the police." "Grant, sit down," Cole said. It wasn't a shout, but the command whipped through the room like a lash. "Your sister is exhausted. She doesn't need you crowding her." "But I just wanted to," Grant started. "This is adult business. Grant," Dana cut in, her voice sharp. "Why don't you go upstairs? Maya and I need to discuss some things regarding the arrangements. You know how sensitive these things are." Grant looked at me, his eyes pleading. He wanted to stay. He knew, on some instinctual level, that leaving me alone with them was wrong, even if he didn't know why. "It is okay, Grant," I said softly, forcing a weak smile. "I will be fine. Go get some rest." He hesitated, then nodded, defeated. He turned and walked up the stairs, his footsteps heavy. I waited until I heard his bedroom door click shut. Now I was alone with them. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dana sat next to me on the sofa, too close. She patted my knee. "We know you are hurting, sweetie," she said. "We all are. But Cole and I were talking while you were gone. We need to handle the practicalities. Mom, your grandmother, she left a chaotic situation." "Chaotic?" I asked, keeping my voice dull. Grandma was the most organized person I knew. Cole stepped away from the fireplace and moved toward the coffee table. He picked up a thick manila folder that had been sitting there. I hadn't noticed it at first, but now, seeing it under the lamplight, my blood ran cold. It wasn't just a folder, it was a dossier. It was packed with documents, and sticking out from the edges were dozens of neon-colored sticky notes, flagging signature lines. She was slipping. "Maya," Cole said, dropping the folder onto the table with a heavy thud. Toward the end, she wasn't herself. Bills were unpaid. Accounts were messy. We are trying to protect her legacy. And quite frankly, protect you from the headache of it all. Dana reached for a ceramic teapot that was sitting on a silver tray on the low table. I hadn't seen her bring it in. It was already there, waiting. "You look like you are about to collapse," Dana said, her voice dropping to a soothing croon. "Here, I made your favorite, chamomile and valerian root. It will help you sleep. You need to sleep. Maya, you haven't slept in days." She poured the liquid into a delicate floral cup. The steam rose up, curling into the air. I watched her hands. They were steady, not a tremor. She was pouring a drink for her daughter, knowing exactly what was in it, and her hand didn't shake. I took the cup. The china felt fragile in my hands. The warmth seeped into my cold fingers. I brought it up, closer to my face. I could smell the chamomile. Yes, but beneath it? Beneath the floral scent. Was there something else? A metallic tang? Or was I imagining it because of what I had heard on the tape? "Drink," Dana urged softly. It will calm your nerves. I lifted the cup to my lips. I saw Cole watching me. He had stopped drinking his whiskey. He was focused entirely on my mouth. I let the liquid touch my bottom lip, just barely. I held it there for a second, feigning a sip, then lowered the cup, letting out a long, shaky sigh. It is hot, I said. I will let it cool for a minute. Dana's eyes narrowed, just a fraction of an inch, but quickly smoothed out. Of course, just don't let it get cold. Cole tapped the folder on the table. While you drink, we should just get this out of the way, he said. It is mostly administrative, just giving Dana the power to handle the funeral home costs, the cemetery maintenance, that sort of thing, and a temporary executor status so we can freeze the assets before the state takes a chunk in taxes. He opened the folder. I leaned forward, squinting as if my eyes were tired. The document on top wasn't about funeral homes. It was a power of attorney, and underneath it, I could see the edge of another document titled Medical Proxy. These papers, they look complicated, I said, rubbing my temple. They are standard, Dana said quickly. Just boilerplate. We put the little flags there so you know where to sign. It will take 2 minutes. Then you can go to bed and sleep for a week if you want. Cole leaned in, looming over the table. Your grandmother left a lot of things. Maya, he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. But she also left a lot of responsibilities. You are not in a position to handle creditors and lawyers right now. Look at you. You are shaking. Let us carry the burden. That is what family does. He was right. I was shaking, but not from weakness. I was shaking from the effort it took not to scream at him that I knew about his gambling debts, about the failed tech startup, about the $2 million they owed. I reached out and touched the corner of the folder. I noticed Dana's gaze shift. She wasn't looking at the papers. She was looking at my purse, which I had set down by my feet. Where did you go? Maya? She asked suddenly. Her voice was light, casual, but her eyes were hard. You said you went to the coast? I froze. Did she know? Had the dark sedan followed me all the way? Yes, I lied. Point defiance. I just sat in the car and watched the water. Did you? She asked. Because your coat. It smells like old smoke, like a cigar. My heart hammered against my ribs. Arthur smoked cigars in his office. The smell must have clung to the wool. There was a man smoking near the parking lot. I said quickly. The wind must have carried it. It was disgusting. Dana held my gaze for a second too long, analyzing, calculating. Then she smiled, a thin stretching of her lips. Well, drink your tea, she said, then sign. I picked up the cup again. I pretended to take a sip, but I kept my lips pressed tight, tilting the cup just enough to wet them. I set it down with a clatter, pressing my hand to my forehead. I can't, I groaned. What do you mean? Cole asked, his tone sharpening. My head, I whimpered, closing my eyes. It is splitting, a migraine. The lights, they are too bright. I can't focus on the words. The letters are swimming. Just sign the flagged lines. Maya, Cole said, impatience bleeding into his voice. You don't need to read the fine print tonight. I can't sign what I can't see, I said, adding a sob to my voice. Please, I am going to be sick. Just let me sleep. I will sign them first thing in the morning. I promise. I just need to lie down. I stood up, swaying slightly on purpose. Dana stood up too. Her face was tight with frustration. She looked at the cup, still full of tea. You didn't finish your drink, she said. I will take it up with me, I said, reaching for it. No, she said sharply. Then she softened her tone. I mean, don't worry about it. I will bring you a fresh one upstairs. Go, get in bed. I didn't wait for permission. I turned and stumbled toward the stairs, clutching the banister like a lifeline. Cole's voice floated up after me. First thing in the morning, Maya, before breakfast. I didn't answer. I climbed the stairs, feeling their eyes boring into my back. When I reached my bedroom, I slipped inside and closed the door. I didn't turn on the light. I moved by memory across the room and turned the lock. Click. It was a flimsy lock, A strong kick could break it. I grabbed a straight-back chair from my desk and wedged it under the doorknob. It was a childish barricade, but it made me feel slightly better. I collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed. I pulled the recorder out of my pocket and checked it. It was still running. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. I heard the murmur of voices downstairs, angry, hushed tones, then heavy footsteps on the stairs. They came down the hallway. They stopped right outside my door. I held my breath. I could see the shadow of feet under the door frame, blocking the faint light from the hall. The handle turned slowly. The lock held. The chair creaked slightly under the pressure. The handle turned again, harder this time. Then, silence. The person didn't knock. They didn't call out my name. They just stood there. I looked at the glowing numbers on my digital clock. It was midnight. The shadow under the door didn't move for 5 minutes. Whoever it was, Cole or Dana, was just standing there, breathing, waiting, listening to see if I was awake, listening to see if the problem in the bedroom was going to solve itself, or if they were going to have to solve it. Finally, the shadow moved. The footsteps retreated down the hall, slow and deliberate. I let out a breath I felt I had been holding since I entered the house. I wasn't safe. I was just safe for tonight. And tomorrow morning, the war would begin in the kitchen. I woke up the next morning to the smell of frying bacon and the sound of cheerful, aggressive normalcy. It was a terrifying contrast to the silent standoff that had occurred at my bedroom door just 8 hours prior. I lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing the role I had to play. I could not be the scared victim barricaded in her room anymore. I had to be the grieving, pliable daughter they needed me to be. I went downstairs. Dana was at the stove, flipping pancakes. Cole was reading the newspaper at the island. The file of legal documents was still sitting on the coffee table in the living room, a silent threat waiting for me. Morning, sleepyhead, Dana chirped. She did not mention the locked door. She did not mention the unfinished tea. I rubbed my eyes, feigning a headache. I am sorry about last night, I said, keeping my voice low and raspy. The migraine. It was blinding. Cole put down his paper. So, you are ready to sign now? We can get this over with before you even have your coffee. I hesitated, letting my lip tremble just slightly. I want to, I said. I really do. I feel so guilty. Guilty? Dana asked, pausing with the spatula in midair. Why? Because I haven't been to her house. I said, I haven't walked through her room since it happened. I feel like if I start signing papers to sell off her assets and close her accounts without saying goodbye to her space, I am betraying her. I looked up at them, widening my eyes. I just need a few hours, I pleaded. I want to go over there, collect a few keepsakes, maybe find that old photo album she promised me. Once I've done that, once I've made my peace, I will come back and sign whatever you want. I promise. Dana and Cole exchanged a look. It was a rapid, silent communication. They were weighing the risk, letting me out of their sight versus the risk of pushing me too hard and making me crack. Take the morning. Cole decided. He sounded benevolent, but his eyes were hard. Be back by 3. We will have the notary here at 4. Thank you, I breathed. I grabbed an apple, refusing the cooked breakfast, and fled. I drove straight to my grandmother's house. It was a Victorian cottage in the North End, painted a soft yellow. It used to be full of light. Now, with the blinds drawn, it felt like a tomb. I unlocked the front door and disarmed the security system using the code she had never changed. I locked the door behind me and waited. 10 minutes later, a knock came at the back service entrance. It was Jonah. He slipped inside, wearing a utility worker's jumpsuit and carrying a toolbox. It was a smart disguise. If the neighbors saw him, they would just think he was fixing a pipe. Did you bring it? Jonah asked. I nodded. I led him to the master bedroom. My grandmother had a heavy antique vanity table where she did her hair every morning. To the naked eye, it was just furniture. But when I was 12, she had shown me the trick. I knelt down and felt under the lip of the bottom drawer. There was a small latch. I pressed it, and a false panel on the side of the vanity popped open. Inside, there was a leather-bound ledger. This wasn't the small notebook Jonah had shown me in the office. This was her master log. I pulled it out, my hands shaking. I opened it to the bookmark ribbon. The entries here were more detailed than the pocket notebook. She had treated her own poisoning like a scientific study. November 2nd, the entry read, "The taste was masked by cinnamon today. Very clever. Dana brought apple cider instead of tea." 20 minutes later, vision blurred. Motor control in left hand weakened. I turned the page. November 5th, I found the receipt in the trash. They are not buying it from the pharmacy. They are buying it from a veterinary supply store. It is digitalis meant for large animals, harder to trace. I felt sick. They were dosing her with animal-grade heart medication. Then I saw the entry that made my breath hitch. It was written in red ink, dated just 3 days before she died. "If I die suddenly, it was not my heart. Check the drink, and protect Maya. They know I am changing the will. They know Maya is the only one who can stop them. If they cannot control me, they will try to control her. Do not let them make her sign the papers." I pulled out my phone. "Jonah, look at this," I whispered. He leaned over my shoulder, reading the entry. He let out a low whistle. "She knew," he said. "She predicted every single move." I began photographing the pages. I took high-resolution shots of every entry, every date, every note. I uploaded them immediately to the encrypted cloud drive Arthur had set up for me, then deleted the photos from my phone's gallery. "We have to put it back," Jonah said, "exactly how it was." "Why?" I asked. "We have the evidence." "Because they have been here," Jonah said. He walked over to the bookshelf in the corner. "Look at the dust," he said, pointing to a row of hardcovers. "See how the dust on the shelf is disturbed in a jagged line? Someone pulled these books out and shoved them back in a hurry. And look at the rug." He pointed to the Persian rug by the bed. "The corner is flipped up just a millimeter," he noted, "and the alignment with the floorboards is off by an inch. They tossed this room. Maya. They were looking for the new will. Or maybe they were looking for this ledger. If they had found it, they would have burned it," I said. "Exactly," Jonah replied, "which means they missed it. But they might come back. If we take it, they will know someone was here. We need them to think you were just here crying over photo albums." I slid the ledger back into the hidden compartment and clicked the panel shut. It looked invisible again. Jonah reached into his toolbox and pulled out a plastic bag. Inside was a crumpled piece of paper. "I found this in the recycling bin in the garage," Jonah said. "Your grandmother must have fished it out of their trash and hidden it. Then someone, maybe Cole, threw it away again thinking it was just garbage during their search." I took the bag. It was a receipt. It was from a feed and seed supply store in Puyallup. The date was October 12th. The item listed was digoxin injectable solution, 500 milliliters. "Who buys heart medication for a horse?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "Cole doesn't own a horse," Jonah said dryly, "but this proves purchase. It proves premeditation, and the date aligns perfectly with the start of your grandmother's symptoms." "This is enough, isn't it?" I asked. "To go to the police?" "It is strong," Jonah admitted, "but remember the goal. We don't just want them arrested for what they did to her. We need to stop what they are doing to you. We need to catch them trying to administer the same thing to you. That is the slam dunk. That is what puts them away for life without parole." He looked me in the eye. "They want to declare you incompetent. Maya, that is their endgame. If you simply call the police now, they will spin a story. They will say you are hysterical, that you are hallucinating, that you forged this diary because you are off your meds. They have already planted the seeds with the family doctor." I remembered Cole's words from the night before. "She is slipping." "So what do we do?" I asked. "We force their hand," Jonah said. "We make them desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Desperate people get sloppy." He outlined the next step. It was dangerous. It required me to walk back into the lion's den and poke the beast. "You go back," Jonah instructed. "You tell them you found something in the house, not the ledger. Something else. Tell them you found a draft of the new will. But I didn't. I said, they don't know that. Jonah smiled grimly. Tell them you found a draft, and it names you as the sole beneficiary. Watch their faces, and then offer to sign the old papers. I frowned. I don't understand. Why would I tell them I found the new will and then agree to sign their papers? Because it creates a ticking clock, Jonah explained. If they think you know about the new will, they will be terrified you are going to take it to a lawyer. But if you act dumb, if you say, I found this weird paper but I don't understand legal stuff, I just want to sign your papers and be done with it, they will think they have one tiny window of opportunity to close the trap before you figure it out. They will try to drug me tonight, I realized, to make sure I am compliant for the notary tomorrow. Exactly, Jonah said, and we will be watching. I left the house 20 minutes later, carrying a box of innocent knickknacks, a porcelain bird, a few scarves, a photo album. I drove back to the house on the hill, my heart pounding a rhythm of pure adrenaline. When I walked through the front door, Dana and Cole were waiting in the living room, exactly where I had left them. Did you find what you were looking for? Dana asked, her eyes darting to the box in my arms. I set the box down. I looked at them, summoning every ounce of acting ability I possessed. I found some photos, I said softly, and I found some papers in her desk. The air in the room vanished. Cole went perfectly still. Papers? He asked. What kind of papers? I shrugged, looking confused. It looked like a letter to Arthur. I said, something about changing everything, giving everything to a trust. It was dated just a few weeks ago. I saw the color drain from Dana's face. She looked at Cole. Cole's jaw tightened. Where is this paper? Maya? Cole asked, his voice very quiet. I left it there. I lied. It seemed complicated. And honestly, I don't want to deal with lawyers. I don't want to fight. I just want this to be over. I looked at the file on the coffee table. I am ready to sign your papers now. I said, but can we do it after dinner? I really want us to have one nice meal together, like a family. I want to make Grandma's pot roast. I want to feel normal for one night. Then I will sign everything. Dana let out a breath she had been holding. She shared a look with Cole, a look of relief, but also of urgent calculation. They thought I was an idiot. They thought I had walked right past a fortune and was handing it to them out of sheer stupidity. But they also knew that the existence of that letter was a loose end. They couldn't let me wake up tomorrow and change my mind. They needed to finalize my incompetence tonight. Of course, sweetie, Dana said, her smile returning, tighter than before. A family dinner sounds perfect. I will cook, I said. No, Dana insisted quickly. You are tired. You rest. I will cook. I will make the pot roast. And I will make that special dessert you love. She was taking the bait. Okay, I said meekly. That sounds nice. I walked up the stairs to my room, feeling their eyes burning into my back. I had just invited the executioner to prepare the meal, and tonight, I was going to make sure the whole world watched them serve it. The afternoon light in the living room was gray and flat, filtering through the high windows like dirty water. I sat on the beige sofa, the thick file of legal documents resting on my knees. The weight of the paper felt significant, like holding a loaded weapon that was pointed back at my own chest. I took a deep breath, smoothing the skirt of my dress, and looked up at my mother. I will sign them, I said, keeping my voice steady but soft. I just need you to explain them to me. I need to understand what I am agreeing to so I can feel at peace with it. Dana blinked. She had expected resistance, or perhaps total submission. She had not expected negotiation. The surprise on her face lasted only a second before her eyes darted toward the hallway. Cole, she called out, her voice sharp. Maya is ready. Come sit with us. She wanted reinforcements. She wanted the two-on-one dynamic that had dominated my childhood, the wall of authority that made me feel small and stupid. Cole walked in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He tossed it onto a chair and sat on the ottoman directly across from me, his knees almost touching mine. He was too close. It was an intimidation tactic. Good, Cole said. Let's get this done. I opened the folder. The first document was the durable power of attorney. This one, I said, pointing to a paragraph in the middle. It says you would have the power to manage all banking transactions and liquidate assets. Does that mean you would control the trust Grandma left? Cole leaned forward, clasping his hands. It just means we can consolidate the accounts. Maya, your grandmother had money in 4 different banks. It is a mess. We need the authority to move it all into one place so we can pay the estate taxes. Otherwise, the government seizes everything. You do not want that, do you? No, I lied. I do not want that. I flipped to the next document, medical directive and guardianship. And this? I asked, keeping my finger on the line that defined incapacity. It says here that if I am deemed unable to make decisions, you become my legal guardians. Who decides if I am unable? Dana jumped in, her voice dripping with artificial honey. That is just a precaution, baby. God forbid you get into a car accident or have a breakdown like you did after the divorce. We just need to be able to talk to the doctors. We need to be able to make sure you get the best care. I looked at her. I saw the predator behind the mascara. She wasn't talking about a car accident. She was talking about tonight. She was talking about the drugs she had bought from a veterinary supply store. She was planning to induce the very breakdown she was claiming to protect me from. So if I get sick, I said slowly, testing the words, you decide where I go? You decide what medication I take? Only if you cannot speak for yourself, Cole said, his voice hard. It is standard. Maya, stop overthinking it. You are acting paranoid. I turned the page, and then I saw it. It was a single sheet of paper tucked between the standard forms. The paper stock was slightly different, brighter, whiter than the rest. The font was a size smaller. I read the header, Assignment of Personal Assets and Real Property. It wasn't about Grandma's estate. It was about mine. Clause 4. Section B. Grantor assigns full authority over personal residence located at, followed by the address of my apartment, and below that, authority to access and manage personal savings accounts held at, followed by the name of my bank. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just about stealing the inheritance. They were trying to strip me naked. They wanted my apartment, my meager savings, my car. They wanted to erase me completely. I felt a surge of nausea, but I forced it down. I looked up, making my face a mask of confusion. Why is my apartment listed here? I asked innocently. I thought this was about Grandma's house. Cole didn't even blink. It is a collateral clause. He lied smoothly. The estate has debts. Maya, to secure the loans to pay off the taxes, we have to show the bank that the family has assets. We are putting our house up as collateral too. We are all in this together. It was a lie, a clumsy, arrogant lie. They assumed I was financially illiterate. Oh, I said, nodding slowly. That makes sense. I guess I didn't realize how much debt she was in. She hid it well. Dana sighed, shaking her head tragically, just like she hid her sickness. I closed the folder. I had seen enough. I knew the depth of their greed now. It was bottomless. Okay, I said. I will sign it. Cole reached into his pocket and produced a pen. He clicked it. Now? He asked. I pulled back slightly. Not right this second. I said, I want to do this right. I want tonight to be special. Dana's smile faltered. Maya, we really need to... I cut her off, my voice pleading. Please, Mom, I want to make the dinner. I want to make her pot roast. The one with the port wine and the shallots. I want us to sit down, eat her favorite meal, share a story about her, and then I will sign everything over dessert. It feels respectful. It feels like closure. I looked at Cole. Please, Cole, just give me this one night. I am agreeing to everything. I just want to say goodbye properly. Cole looked at the folder, then at me. He saw a broken, sentimental girl who was about to hand him millions of dollars. He figured he could tolerate a pot roast. Fine, he grunted. Dinner, then signatures. No more delays. Thank you, I breathed. I stood up, energizing myself with false enthusiasm. But we do not have the right ingredients, I said. Grandma was specific. We need the tawny port, not the ruby, and we need fresh pearl onions, not the frozen ones. We have to go to the market. I can go, Dana said. Standing up, you stay here and rest. No, I insisted, grabbing her hand. I want us all to go. I don't want to be in this house alone right now. It is too quiet. Please, Mom, let's go to the Metropolitan Market. It will take 40 minutes. We can get coffee. Just a drive. Together. Dana hesitated. She looked at the kitchen, where she had probably already prepared the next dose. She looked at Cole. Cole checked his watch. It was 4:30. The traffic will be bad, he muttered. Please, I said again, squeezing Dana's hand. For Grandma? Dana sighed, a sound of theatrical martyrdom. Fine, get your coat, but we are not stopping for coffee. We get the wine, the onions, and we come straight back. I turned away to hide the triumph in my eyes. I will get my purse, I said. I ran upstairs. I grabbed my bag. But before I left the room, I pulled out my phone. I sent a single text message to a number saved as pizza delivery. We are leaving. You have 45 minutes. Go. I deleted the text immediately. When I came back downstairs, they were waiting by the door. Grant was nowhere to be seen. Where is Grant? I asked. He went to his friend's house, Dana said dismissively. He didn't want to be part of the boring talk. Perfect. That meant the house was empty. We got into Cole's car. I climbed into the back seat. Cole drove, and Dana sat in the passenger seat. As we pulled out of the driveway, I watched the house recede in the rear window. I prayed Jonah was watching. I prayed he was already moving. The drive to the market was excruciating. The silence in the car was thick and suffocating. Cole drove aggressively, tailgating slower cars, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Dana kept adjusting her rear-view mirror. At first, I thought she was checking traffic. Then I realized she was angling it to look at me. Every time I looked up, I met her eyes in the glass. They were cold, calculating, searching for cracks in my armor. You seem better. Maya, she said suddenly. Her voice cut through the silence like a razor. I am, I said, forcing a small smile. I think just making a decision helped. Knowing that you guys are going to handle everything, it is a relief. I felt so overwhelmed before. I am glad, she said, but her eyes didn't look glad. They looked suspicious. She knew me. She knew I was stubborn. This sudden capitulation was convenient. Yes, but was it real? I leaned forward, resting my hand on the back of her seat. I just realized I cannot fight it. Mom, I said softly, I am not strong enough. You were right. I need help. That seemed to satisfy her. The tension in her shoulders dropped an inch. We are just doing what is best for you, she said, repeating the mantra she used to justify every hurt she had ever inflicted. We arrived at the market. I dragged out the shopping trip as long as I could. I spent 5 minutes comparing bunches of thyme. I deliberated over the brand of butter. Cole was pacing the aisle, checking his phone every 30 seconds. Hurry up, Maya, he snapped when I picked up a second bottle of wine. I just want it to be perfect, I murmured. By the time we checked out and got back in the car, 50 minutes had passed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. One vibration. That was the signal. Done. Jonah and his team had been in the house. They had planted the cameras. They had placed the microphones. The stage was set. On the drive back, the atmosphere shifted. The sun had set, and the darkness seemed to embolden them. They weren't just impatient now. They were hungry. They could feel the money getting closer. When we get back, Dana said, turning around to face me, I will start the roast. You can pour the wine. We can have a glass while it cooks. A glass of wine. That was the delivery system. They were going to drug the wine. That sounds lovely, I said. I looked out the window at the passing streetlights. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I was walking voluntarily into a trap, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't the victim, I was the bait. As we turned onto our street, Cole spoke up. "After dinner, we sign," he said firmly. "No more stories, no more crying. We sign, and then we are done." I looked at the back of his head. "Yes," I thought, "we are done, but not the way you think." The car rolled up the driveway. The house was dark, exactly as we had left it, but I knew it was different now. It had eyes, it had ears. I stepped out of the car, clutching the bag of pearl onions. "Let's cook," I said. I walked up the steps, and for the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel afraid of the dark door. I knew who was waiting on the other side, and I knew that tonight, the truth was finally going to come out into the light. The morning sun that filtered through the kitchen blinds was pale and watery, casting long, prison-bar shadows across the granite countertops. I had managed to survive the previous night by sheer luck and a feigned collapse. After our trip to the market, I had pleaded a sudden, violent return of my migraine, locking myself in my bedroom before the pot roast was even served. I had heard Cole pacing the hallway for an hour, his heavy footsteps vibrating through the floorboards, but eventually, they had retreated. But now, it was morning. The grace period was over. I walked into the kitchen at 7 o'clock. The house was unnervingly quiet. The silence felt heavy, pressurized, like the air inside a submarine before the hull cracks. Dana was already there. She was standing by the stove, the kettle whistling softly. She wore a silk robe that shimmered like spilled oil, her back rigid with tension. When she heard me enter, she turned, and the mask of the caring mother slammed back into place so fast it was almost audible. "Good morning, sweetie," she cooed. Her eyes scanned me, looking for any sign of resistance. "You slept a long time." "I needed it," I said, keeping my voice low and drowsy. I felt heavy. "That is the stress leaving your body," Dana said, nodding sagely. She moved toward the cabinet where the mugs were kept. I was thinking, before we sit down with the papers, you need something to center yourself. Remember that special blend Grandma used to make? The one with the dried valerian and the lemon balm? I froze internally. This was it. This was the opening move. She always said it cleared the fog. Dana continued, reaching for a tin canister on the top shelf. "I found her recipe card. I thought it might help you focus." I walked further into the room. I knew exactly where I needed to be. Jonah had sent me a diagram of the camera angles late last night via an encrypted message. There was a wide-angle lens hidden in the motion sensor of the alarm system in the corner, and a high-definition pinhole camera concealed in the decorative vent of the microwave. I needed to be at the center island, specifically the stool on the far left. "That sounds perfect, Mom," I said, infusing my voice with a desperate kind of gratitude. I sat down on the specific stool, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. I wanted exactly how she made it. I want the exact taste. I saw Dana's shoulders relax. She thought she had me. She thought I was chasing a memory, walking blindly into the very method she had used to kill that memory. "I want you to feel like she is here with us," Dana said softly. She turned her back to me to prepare the drink. Her body blocked the view of the counter from where I sat, but she was standing directly in the line of sight of the microwave camera. I watched her reflection in the dark glass of the oven. It was ghostly and distorted, but I could see her movements. She opened the tin of tea. She spooned the dried leaves into the steeper. And then I heard it. It was a sound so faint that if the house had not been deadly silent, I would have missed it. Click. It was the sound of a small glass lid being unscrewed, or perhaps a vial being uncapped. It was the exact sound my grandmother had described in her journal, the little click before the bitterness. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I forced myself to breathe evenly. I could not run. I had to let this happen. Dana's hand moved quickly. I saw a flash of something small and silver in her palm. Not a spoon, but a dropper or a small bottle. She tipped it over the steaming mug. 1, 2, 3 drops. Then she shoved the small object into the deep pocket of her robe. She stirred the tea vigorously. The spoon clinked against the ceramic, a cheerful domestic sound that masked a lethal intent. "Here we go," she said, turning around. She placed the mug in front of me. The steam rose in a curling gray ribbon. The smell was earthy and floral, overpowering the senses. "Drink it while it is hot," Dana urged. Her eyes were fixed on my face. She wasn't blinking. It was the stare of a scientist waiting for a reaction in a petri dish. I lifted the mug. My hand was trembling, and for once, I didn't have to fake it. The terror was real. I was holding poison in my hands, brewed by my own mother. I brought the cup toward my lips. I saw Dana's pupils dilate. She was leaning forward slightly. Her breath held. I knew I could not drink it, not even a sip. Jonah had warned me that even a small dose could sedate me enough to make my signature legally binding but mentally coerced. I tilted the cup. I let the steam hit my face. "It smells just like hers," I whispered. Then, just as the ceramic touched my bottom lip, I jerked my hand. It was a calculated spasm. I flinched as if startled by a ghost. The mug slipped from my fingers. It hit the granite countertop with a sickening crunch. The hot liquid exploded outward, splashing across the counter, dripping onto the floor, and soaking the sleeve of my pajamas. The mug shattered into 3 large pieces. "Oh my God!" I cried out, jumping back. "I am so sorry. My hand, it just twitched. I am so clumsy." Dana stared at the mess. For a split second, the mask dropped completely. Her face twisted into a snarl of pure, unadulterated rage. It was uglier than anything I had ever seen. She looked at the wasted liquid pooling on the floor, as if I had just spilled her own blood. "Maya," she hissed. "I am sorry. Mom," I stammered, backing away, clutching my wrist. "I don't know what happened. I am just so nervous. Please don't be mad." The kitchen door swung open. Cole marched in. He was dressed in a suit, ready for the notary. He looked at the shattered mug, then at the puddle of tea spreading toward the edge of the counter, and finally at Dana's furious face. "What is going on?" he demanded. His voice was cold, sharp as a whip crack. "She dropped it," Dana snapped, her voice trembling with suppressed violence. "She wasted it." "I am sorry. Cole," I cried, making myself sound small and pathetic. "I wanted to drink it. I really did. I need another one. Please, I need to calm down before we sign." Cole looked at me with disgust. Then he looked at his watch. "We do not have time for this drama. Maya, the notary will be here in 45 minutes. "I can't sign like this," I wailed, holding up my shaking hands. "Look at me. I am a wreck. I need the tea. Mom said it would help. Please, just make me one more, and I promise I will drink it and sign whatever you want." I was betting everything on their greed. I was betting that their desire to have a sedated, compliant victim would outweigh their caution. Cole looked at Dana. "Make another one," he ordered, "and this time, put it in a plastic cup if you have to. Just get it down her throat. Do not stall." He stood there, crossing his arms, watching. This was exactly what Jonah had wanted. Pressure, urgency. Dana moved back to the counter. She was angry now. She was flustered. The smooth, practiced movements of the first attempt were gone. She snatched a new mug from the drying rack. She grabbed the tin of tea. I sat back down, effectively pinning myself between them. I made sure to look at the floor, acting the part of the chastised child, but I angled my body so I wasn't blocking the microwave camera. Dana didn't bother to turn her back fully this time. She felt the pressure of Cole's gaze and the ticking clock. She wanted to get it done. She reached into her robe pocket. She pulled out the small glass vial. Because she was rushing, and because her hands were shaking with rage, she fumbled it. The vial slipped in her fingers. She caught it, but in doing so, she held it up high, right into the shaft of sunlight hitting the counter, right into the perfect focus of the hidden camera. It was a small, amber bottle with a white label. Even from where I sat, I could see the skull and crossbones warning symbol. She uncapped it violently. She didn't measure 3 drops this time. She squeezed a long, steady stream of the clear liquid into the hot water. It was an overdose. It was a statement. She shoved the bottle back into her pocket and swirled the mug once. "Here," she said, slamming the mug down in front of me. The liquid sloshed over the rim. "Drink it, now." Cole stepped closer. He was looming over me, his shadow falling across the table. "Bottoms up, Maya," he said. I looked at the mug. Then I looked at the camera in the microwave vent. I hoped the lens had caught the label. I hoped the resolution was as high as Jonah had promised. I reached for the mug. My hand was steady now. The fear had crystallized into something cold and hard, like a diamond. "Thank you, Mom," I said. I lifted the cup. I brought it to my lips. "Drink," Cole commanded. I held the cup there. The steam warmed my nose. I could smell the metallic taint of the poison underneath the lemon balm. It was the smell of betrayal. I took a deep breath, preparing for the final act. I didn't drink. Instead, I set the cup down gently, with a deliberate, calm clink that sounded like a gavel hitting a sounding block. I looked up at Dana. I looked right into her eyes. "I think I will wait," I said. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. It was clear. It was strong. Dana froze. "What did you say?" she whispered. "I said I will wait," I repeated. I stood up, pushing the stool back. It scraped loudly against the floor. Cole moved to block my path. "You are not going anywhere until that cup is empty and those papers are signed," he growled. I looked at him, then back at the microwave. "I think you used too much of the special ingredient this time." "Mom," I said, "the camera definitely saw the label." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had just stopped ticking and was about to detonate. Dana's hand went to her pocket. Her face went pale, draining of all color until she looked like a wax figure. "What camera?" Cole asked, his voice barely a sound. I pointed to the microwave vent. Then I pointed to the motion sensor in the corner. "The ones that have been recording audio and video since yesterday afternoon," I said. "The ones that just live-streamed you pouring veterinary-grade digoxin into my tea to a secure server at my lawyer's office." Dana made a sound, a choked, strangled gasp. She looked at the mug in front of me, the steaming evidence of her crime. Cole lunged. He didn't go for the camera. He went for me. His hand shot out, grabbing my upper arm, his fingers digging into my flesh like talons. "Give me the phone," he shouted, assuming I was controlling it. But I wasn't holding my phone. I was holding my ground. "Get your hands off me." "Cole," I said, my voice rising. "Or do you want to add assault to the attempted murder charge?" He didn't let go. He shook me, his face twisting into a mask of panic and violence. "You little witch," he screamed. "You set us up." Dana was backing away toward the sink, her hand fumbling in her pocket, trying to pull out the vial, trying to get rid of it. "Don't bother." "Mom," I yelled over Cole's shouting. "We have the receipt from the feed store. We have Grandma's journal. We have everything." Cole raised his hand. I saw the fist coming. I flinched, bracing for the impact. But the blow never landed. The front door burst open with a crash that shook the walls. "Police, show me your hands." The shout filled the house, loud and authoritative. Heavy boots thundered on the hardwood floor. Cole froze, his fists suspended in the air. He looked at the door, then at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The game wasn't just over. The board had been flipped. Dana dropped the vial. It shattered on the floor, mixing with the spilled tea. "It doesn't matter," I said to her, watching the glass scatter. "We have the video." I pulled my arm from Cole's slackened grip and stepped back. The first uniformed officer burst into the kitchen, his weapon drawn. Behind him was Jonah. And behind Jonah was Arthur Wexler. I looked at my mother. She was leaning against the counter, sliding down toward the floor, her eyes wide and empty. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a profound, exhausting relief. "I told you," I said softly, more to myself than to them. I wanted the exact taste. And now, they had to swallow it. The heavy ceramic mug made a sharp, deliberate sound as I set it back down on the granite countertop. The steam curled between us, carrying the sickly sweet scent of lemon balm and the invisible, metallic tang of betrayal. I had lifted it. I had let the porcelain hover inches from my lips, but I had not drunk. I looked straight at Dana. I did not blink. I did not tremble. "It tastes different," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the dead silence of the kitchen, it sounded like a gunshot. Dana's smile flickered, a glitch in the perfect mask she had worn for 30 years. She reached out, her fingers twitching as if she wanted to push the cup back toward my mouth. "It is just a fresh batch, sweetie," she said, her laugh brittle and high-pitched. "I bought the organic honey this time. It changes the profile slightly. Drink it. It will help with the nerves." I saw her eyes dart to Cole, then back to me. The pupils were dilating, shaking with a mixture of fear and impatience. "I don't think it is the honey," I said calmly. I reached into my pocket. I did not pull out a tissue. I pulled out the USB drive I had retrieved from my car earlier that morning, plugging it into a small portable speaker I had placed on the counter behind the fruit bowl. "What are you doing?" Cole asked, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Stop playing games. Maya, sign the papers." I pressed the play button. The sound of static filled the room, scratching at the tension. Then, my grandmother's voice cut through the air. It was the recording from October 24th, the one where her breath hitched with pain, the one where she sounded small and terrified. "Tastes like metal today, like sucking on an old penny. I feel the fluttering starting. Maya, if you are listening to this, do not trust the tears." The color drained from Dana's face so fast, it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. She staggered back against the refrigerator, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Cole went rigid. He stared at the small black speaker as if it were a bomb. "Turn it off," he barked, stepping toward me. "Don't sign the papers." Grandma's voice continued, haunting and undeniable. "They need you to be weak, so they can be strong." Cole lunged. He moved with the sudden, violent speed of a cornered animal, his hand outstretched to snatch the device. I took a step back, moving exactly to the mark Jonah had taped on the floor with invisible UV marker, the spot where the camera in the microwave vent had a perfect, unobstructed view. "Don't touch it, Cole," I warned, my voice icy. He stopped, realizing I wasn't cowering. I was standing tall. I was looking down at him. "Where did you get that?" he hissed. That is fake. You manipulated it with AI. You are sick." "It is not fake," a voice said from the doorway. We all turned. Grant was standing at the bottom of the stairs. He was wearing his running clothes, his face pale and slack with shock. He had not gone to his friend's house. He had come back, or maybe he had never left. He was staring at Dana, his eyes wide with a horror that broke my heart. "Grant," Dana whispered, pushing herself off the fridge. "Baby, this isn't... You shouldn't be here." "I heard her," Grant said, his voice cracking. "I heard Grandma. She said she was scared. She said you were doing it to her." He walked into the kitchen, his movements slow and dreamlike. He looked at the mug of tea sitting on the counter. The steam had stopped rising. It just sat there, a pool of poison in a cheerful floral cup. "You told me she died in her sleep," Grant said, looking at Cole. "You told me her heart just stopped." "It did!" Dana cried out, her voice shrill. "She was old. Grant, she was sick. Maya is trying to confuse you. She is having a breakdown." "No," I said firmly. "I am not the one breaking down. Mom." I looked at the camera again, ensuring the red light of the recording indicator was reflected in my eyes. "We have the receipts. Dana, the digoxin from the feed store in Puyallup, October 12th. We have the logbook where Grandma wrote down every time you gave her a drink and every time she felt sick afterwards. We have the toxicology report on the residue she saved." Dana looked at Cole, panic seizing her features. She saw the ship sinking, and her survival instinct, the most powerful force in her hollow soul, kicked in. She didn't try to defend them. She tried to save herself. "He made me do it!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Cole. "Dana," Cole roared. "He threatened me," Dana sobbed, tears streaming down her face, instant and weaponized. "He said we were going to lose the house. He said he owed money to bad people and they would hurt us. I didn't want to. I just wanted to sedate her. I just wanted her to sign the papers so we could pay the debts." She turned to Grant, clutching his arm. "Baby, you have to believe me. I am a victim here too. I was just trying to protect this family." Cole's face turned a violent shade of purple. He grabbed Dana's wrist and threw it off him. "Shut up, you stupid woman," he shouted, losing all control. "You were the one who said she was taking too long. You were the one who said we needed the timing to be right before the quarter ended." The silence that followed that admission was absolute. We needed the timing to be right. He had just confessed. He had just confirmed the motive and the premeditation in a single breath, recorded in high definition by 3 separate cameras. Grant stepped back from them, revulsion twisting his face. He looked at his parents as if they were monsters wearing human skin. "You killed her," Grant whispered. "You killed Grandma for money." "And you were trying to do the same thing to me," I added, pointing to the cup. "Just now, you put the same thing in that cup. I saw the bottle. Mom." Dana's eyes went wild. She looked at the cup, then at the phone, then at me. She realized there was no way out. The victim act hadn't worked. The denial hadn't worked. There was only rage left. "Give me that phone," she shrieked. She launched herself at me. It wasn't a slap. It was a clawing, desperate attack. She wanted to destroy the evidence. She wanted to tear the truth out of my hands. I braced myself, ready to fight, but I didn't have to. A blur of motion cut between us. Grant stepped in front of me. He was taller than her, stronger than her. He caught her wrists in midair, stopping her claws inches from my face. "Stop it," he yelled, shoving her back. "Grant!" Dana gasped, looking at him in betrayal. "Get out of the way. She is ruining us." "No!" Grant screamed, his voice raw. "You ruined us! You—" He stood there, panting, his back to me, creating a human shield between me and the people who had raised us. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the golden boy, the oblivious prince. He was my brother. I stepped back, my hand gripping the phone. "It is over," I said, my voice cutting through their heavy breathing. "The cameras have been streaming this entire conversation to Arthur's office. The police are not on their way. They are already here." As if on cue, the sound of sirens cut through the morning air, growing louder with every second, closing in on the house on the hill. Cole slumped against the counter, the fight draining out of him. But Dana just stared at me, her eyes full of hate, realizing that the daughter she had tried to erase was the one who had finally, permanently, erased her. The sirens did not sound like a rescue. They sounded like an ending. When the front door burst open, the hallway flooded with uniformed officers. But the 2 figures that mattered most to me were walking right behind them. Jonah Pike entered with the calm stride of a man who had already won the game, holding a tablet that was still streaming the live feed from the kitchen. Beside him was Arthur Wexler, clutching a briefcase against his chest like a shield, looking grim but determined. I stepped back as the room dissolved into chaos. "Police! Hands where I can see them!" an officer shouted, his voice bouncing off the high ceilings. Cole raised his hands slowly, his face draining of the rage that had been there just seconds before, replaced by a gray, sickly fear. He looked at Arthur, then at the tablet in Jonah's hand, and the calculation in his eyes died out. He knew they had seen everything. Dana did not raise her hands. She collapsed. It was not a faint. It was a surrender to gravity. She slid down the front of the refrigerator and hit the floor in a heap of silk and sobbing. "It was not me," she wailed, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. "I did not want to do it. Cole made me. He said we would lose the house. He said he would leave me if I did not help him get the money." Shut up. Dana, Cole snapped. Though his voice lacked its usual bite, he turned to the nearest officer. Officer, my wife is hysterical. She has a history of mental instability. I was merely trying to restrain her from hurting herself. Jonah stepped forward, holding the tablet up like a mirror to their lies. We have video evidence of you instructing her to pour the solution, Jonah said, his voice cutting through the noise. We have audio of you discussing the dosage, and we have the receipt for the digoxin found in your trash, matched to the residue found in the victim's cup. This is not a domestic dispute. This is conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and elder abuse. The officer moved in, pulling Cole's arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. Arthur stepped into the center of the kitchen. He looked down at Dana, who was now clutching the hem of the officer's pant leg, begging for mercy. Evelyn knew, Arthur said softly. Dana looked up, her mascara running in dark streaks down her face. What? She whispered. She knew you would try this, Arthur continued. Opening his briefcase, he pulled out a document stamped with a red seal. 2 weeks ago, she triggered the protection clause in her trust. It states that in the event of her suspicious death, or any attempt to declare her heirs incompetent, the entire estate bypasses the immediate family. He looked at Cole, who was being marched toward the door. It goes into a blind trust, Arthur explained, managed by a third-party executor for the benefit of charity and a small stipend for the grandchildren only. Even if Maya had signed those papers tonight, you would have gotten nothing, not a single dime. You killed her for $0. The realization hit Cole like a physical blow. He sagged in the officer's grip, his knees buckling, the greed that had driven him, the debt that had terrified him. It was all for nothing. Grant was standing by the island, watching his parents being hauled away. He looked like a child who had woken up in a nightmare. He looked at the handcuffs on his mother's wrists. "Mom?" he choked out. Dana looked at him, her eyes wide and desperate. "Grant, baby, call the lawyer, call the firm. Tell them it is a mistake." Grant shook his head slowly. "It is not a mistake," he said, his voice breaking. "I heard you. I heard everything." He turned his back on her. It was the final severance. He walked over to where I was standing and stood next to me. He did not say a word, but he didn't have to. He was choosing a side. For the first time in 30 years, the golden boy was standing in the shadows with his sister. As the police led Dana out, she started screaming my name, cursing me, calling me an ungrateful wretch, blaming me for the ruin of the family. I watched her go. I felt nothing but a cold, heavy pity. She was not a mother. She was just a woman who had loved money more than she had loved her own blood. Then they were gone. The flashing blue lights faded from the window as the cruisers drove away. Jonah and Arthur stayed behind to give statements to the lead detective, but eventually, they left too. Jonah squeezed my shoulder on his way out, a silent acknowledgement of a war won. The house fell silent. It was a different kind of silence than the one that had haunted the halls for the last week. It was not the silence of secrets or holding one's breath. It was the silence of a vacuum, empty and clean. Grant sat on the stairs, his head in his hands. "I am sorry, Maya," he whispered. "I am so sorry I didn't see it." I walked over and sat next to him. "You were not supposed to see it," I said. "That was how the trick worked." I stood up and walked back into the kitchen. The shattered pieces of the mug were still on the floor. The puddle of tea had spread, sticky and dark near the grout lines. I sat down at the island, on the same stool where I had sat 10 minutes ago. I looked at the spot where my grandmother used to sit every morning, sipping her tea, solving her crossword puzzles. I thought about her sitting here, feeling her heart flutter, tasting the metal in her mouth, and realizing the truth. I thought about the terror she must have felt, knowing the people she had raised were slowly killing her, and yet she hadn't screamed, she hadn't run. She had sat right here and written it all down. She had played the long game to save me. I put my head down on the cool granite, and finally, I cried. I sobbed for the fear she had hidden. I sobbed for the lonely war she had fought in this kitchen. I sobbed because I was alive, and she was not. After a long time, I wiped my face. There was one last thing to do. I walked to the living room. There was a small wall safe behind a painting of the ocean. A painting Grandma had painted herself. I knew about it, but I had never opened it. I stood before it. I closed my eyes and remembered the code. 2, 3, 7, 8. Cerulean. I punched in the numbers. The lock clicked open with a soft, mechanical sigh. Inside, the safe was empty except for a single white envelope. It had my name on it, written in her steady, beautiful script. I took it out and sat on the floor. My dearest Maya. The letter began. If you are reading this, then the storm is over. I am sorry I had to leave you to fight it alone, but I knew you were the only one strong enough to finish it. I knew they would come for you. I knew they would try to take your voice just like they took mine. But you have something they never had. You have a heart that sees the truth. The money and the trust is yours. Maya, I set it up so that once the investigation is complete, the control reverts to you. Use it, not to buy things, but to build a life where you never have to be afraid of a knock on the door. Take care of Grant. He is weak, but he is not wicked. He will need you now. The bird is not blue, my love. It is cerulean. Never let anyone tell you the sky is just blue when you know it is so much more. Love, Grandma. I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. The morning sun was fully up now, streaming through the windows, burning away the gray mist that had clung to the house for days. The air felt lighter. The smell of the spilled tea was fading. I stood up. I looked at Grant, who was watching me from the doorway. What do we do now? He asked, looking lost. I looked around the house. It was just wood and stone. It was not a prison anymore. Now, I said, walking toward him, we clean up the mess. I picked up the broom. I swept up the broken porcelain. I mopped up the poison. I threw it all in the trash and carried the bag outside to the bin. As the lid slammed shut, I looked out at the city of Tacoma below us. The world was moving on. Cars were driving on the highway. People were going to work. But my world had stopped and restarted. I was not the victim in a tragedy. I was the survivor in a story of justice. And as I walked back into the house that was finally, truly mine, I knew that Grandma was right. The sky wasn't just blue. It was a million colors. And for the first time in my life, I was free to see all of them. Thank you so much for listening to Maya's story. It was a dark journey, but sometimes we have to walk through the shadows to find the light. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Please leave a comment below and share your location and your thoughts on how Maya handled her family. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share these stories of justice with more people. Until next time, stay safe and trust your instincts.